Now we are. Now we are. Now we're rolling. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Polititeen podcast. My name is Damon Galvin, and as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host Varun.
Hey guys, my name is Varun Katathala. I'm the co-host of the Polititeen podcast. Back again for another amazing episode of our podcast, season 2, episode number 6, with Damien, my amazing co-host. It's Wednesday today. We're having an amazing discussion, hopefully about, not so amazing about the vaccine crisis in India, the COVID crisis in India, and the police brutality incidents that have been happening over the past couple of weeks and months. It has been a string of events we have seen with, last week we talked about Dante Wright, Karen Nazario. We're going to talk about Isaiah Brown today and other situations that unfolded over the weekend. We're going to talk a lot about, COVID for the most part, because in my home country, India, thousands of people are dying per day, right, because of this terrible virus, and it's having a spike in India because of the government's inaction, much like we saw here last year. What's happening is, from what I've seen from friends and family in the news, the Indian news,
Yeah.
Narendra Modi, the PM of India, basically a couple of months ago told people that COVID was basically over. Okay, and he was hosting wide rallies with thousands and thousands of people, and he was hosting, no masks, obviously, and he was hosting, big festivals and pujas, prayers for the Hindus, and these things were all without distancing, without mask wearing, and this is the Prime Minister of India promoting these events, and so that's why we had this big spike, I believe, in these COVID cases and deaths. But the problem is, in India, there's not enough vaccines out in the public to be having these kinds of events. It's not herd immunity yet. They're way behind the herd immunity mark. And this is something we've seen in many developing countries, Damien. 0.2% of vaccines have gone out to developing countries, these low income countries. We may see a lot of vaccines given out to the US and these wealthy nations, but it's really a disparity between the wealthy and the underdeveloped nations. President Biden told us just a couple of days ago, I believe, that he would send out 60 million AstraZeneca vaccines to India and other nations. He didn't specify India, but he kind of implied it. And other developing nations that have been, down in vaccines and have had an outbreak in COVID-19. I think we have to reestablish ourselves as this kind of global power in giving vaccines and in making sure every country is safe from COVID, because we are this huge global community of people who need to stay safe, and we can't allow for things to happen in places even like India where deaths are becoming more and more high by the day. And I think, being an Indian person, one thing that I had a problem with is suppression of COVID-19 cases and deaths. Here, we may have had a lot of cases, but one thing I applaud our government and the Trump administration in doing is revealing accurate counts of information about how many deaths that we have. I mean, he wasn't suppressing it as much as, say, Governor Kemp was in Georgia, but these things were happening in the U.S. and they're not happening in India, and that's why our community does not know the exact, death toll of the nation, which is like very frustrating to me as an Indian citizen.
Yeah. And like, I feel like, hold on, your camera froze. Oh, it froze on my half. You're good. I feel like what a lot of people forget too. So first of all, I don't know if you heard about I was hearing about something with the U.S. diplomats in India too. Like all of them got COVID. Like 100 U.S. diplomats in India got COVID. I don't know. I don't know if that's 100. You can fact check me while I'm talking about that. But I had heard something about that. And then the other thing that a lot of people forget is, like, in these densely populated areas and whatnot, and in these low developing communities, it's important to take care of them. And I've talked about this before, maybe on my live stream. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast, but essentially what happens is you have these third world countries that are spreading, the vaccine and whatnot. And what ends up happening is that mutations come out of these countries. Right. So while you're like, oh, it's fine, like as long as the U.S., America first, right? This America first idea, America first, America first. Well, when you put America first and you become individualistic and you forget to globalize, you get, bit in the ass. And if we're letting if we're letting India, that has a population of 1.5 billion people, if I'm not mistaken, around there, a huge, dense population, spread. I think they had 350,000 cases today or something like that. And imagine how many mutations might come out of just different regions of India. And, it also goes into a lot of different aspects of our healthcare system and how, faulty, even our own healthcare system is, but the AstraZeneca vaccine. I remember you were talking about that.
Mhm.
I know that we have a bunch of AstraZeneca that Trump bought that we didn't end up using and that we're not going to use. But that's another thing that's happening here in the US because like we're talking about India obviously, which is like a huge problem. But I was mentioning how we're like, it's okay. Like some people might be like, it's okay. India is doing their thing. Third world countries are doing their things. It's fine because as Americans, America first, we're all getting vaccinated, but we're not.
Mhm.
Like that's something else that we're forgetting too. Like a lot of us are not getting vaccinated. And I think that it's important to remember that, I mean, despite being Republican or Democrat, conservative, leftist, right, whatever you are, non-political, and somehow listening to this podcast, you like get vaccinated. Get vaccinated,
Yeah.
and beyond getting vaccinated, get your second dose as well. And if
Oh
you
yeah.
don't have confidence in the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, that's fine. That's understandable. I'm telling you now, our health experts are letting us know that the risk of the blood clots that develop possibly with the Johnson and Johnson vaccine are substantially lower than the risk of getting COVID-19 and the health complications, which include blood clots that could come from contracting COVID-19. So get vaccinated. Get a lot of people vaccinated. You want to know something funny?
Go ahead.
My neighbor was talking about how she doesn't want to get the vaccine, right? She's like right
Right.
leaning. Not my this neighbor, not Mr. Tom, my other neighbor, because I talk about this neighbor a lot. But my other neighbor was talking about how she doesn't want to get the vaccine. She's right leaning. Man, I'm like in a conservative sandwich here. I just realized. Shh, gotta get out, man. But no, she's right leaning, and she was like, I don't want to put something that's harmful inside my body. And she was talking to my mom, and my mom was like, "Don't you smoke every day?"
Oh my god.
And it was just like a funny. I thought that was hilarious. She was like, "Yeah, I don't want to put something that's harmful inside my body." And it's like, bro, you smoke all the
Oh
time, like
my
every
god.
day. And
Yeah.
and that's like I don't know if you've seen those memes coming out. Like there was or not like I guess yeah, like it's becoming a meme where it was like this couple like eating something out of a toilet. And it was like someone was like, "These are the same people that say they don't want to put the vaccine in their body because it's harmful." And it's
Yeah.
as funny as it is, it's like we do have to get vaccinated. And there's a lot of, I mean, the FDA. What was the FDA talking about? You probably know about this a little bit more. Like the FDA was talking about how me and you. Well, you got your second vaccine, didn't you?
Yeah, I did last week.
Yes. Well, me and you now, and you in a week, me in a couple days, we would like be able to be like maskless doing
Yeah.
whatever we wanted. Like
Yeah.
that's what the
So we can
FDA is
be
gonna or the CDC is gonna announce tomorrow.
yeah, we can be indoors without masks as per like CDC regulations as per like a couple of weeks ago. And so
Yeah.
it's a big, sense of freedom. Not having to wear a mask indoors is crazy. Think about like the fact that we've been in school wearing masks for I don't know how long, 8 months now. And
Yeah.
so it's been insane, having to do that. And I think that we're coming to the end of the the COVID crisis, as we like to call it in the podcast, and as people like to call it. But it is through people getting their vaccine because we can't have like half the population getting a vaccine and the half other not getting a vaccine because that creates
Right.
complications in meeting up without masks and things like that because we don't know who's vaccinated or not. Herd immunity is
Exactly.
70% of the population.
Mhm.
And so once that benchmark is hit, we'll be able to have these undistanced events and things like that. And that's the goal for all of us, right? I don't think anybody wants to stay indoors and wear a mask. Like I haven't heard a single person wanting to do that. The problem is people in this nation often have news sources who basically spew misinformation, I would say, about the vaccine, saying that it's counterproductive. And some people even have concerns about the side effects of the vaccine itself in terms of like even, me as a person, I had side effects. The day of the vaccine, I had body chills. I had a fever. I was sidelined from school. I couldn't, attend school for the last period of school. But these things are all necessary to make sure I don't have not necessary, permanent lung damage from COVID-19. That's a bigger thing than a couple of body chills and a day's worth of symptoms. And so I think
Mhm.
it's about what you prioritize more, your long term health or a day's worth of like just being sidelined.
Well,
And I
it's not
think
even a day's worth either because
it's
COVID
not.
takes you out for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, it's a day's worth for the vaccine and 2 weeks
Yeah,
plus a lifetime of respiratory illnesses in the future
exactly.
with COVID. And then we're blessed to be in this situation, Damien, because we have a great set of vaccines. We have Johnson and Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, whereas places like India and Russia don't have the best vaccines. Russia was sending out millions and millions of vaccines to people without being tested on actual animals and humans. That's a mistake, right? We have tested vaccines that have been approved by the FDA and went through countless procedures. We should take advantage of that and be proud in that. I understand
Yeah,
skepticism in places like India and Russia, but here I think we have to trust the government when it matters to our health.
yeah. And something else that like a lot of people forget, because again, talking about the same neighbor, she's like, "Oh, there's no way." Like she's a nurse, which I think is funny, but um, it's like there's
Oh shit.
no. Yeah, yeah, I know. She's like, but based on her studies, she's like, there's no way that they could come out with a vaccine in a year. And I'm like, what you forget is that you have the whole world,
Yeah, yeah,
the best scientists. Like, screw what your book says. You have scientists that have dedicated their whole, that wrote your book, working
yeah.
on getting this vaccine and making sure that it's safe as possible. And then you also have the FDA actually approving these vaccines, and like not just green lighting them, being like, yeah, 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 go, 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 go. Like actually taking consideration as to who can get the vaccines, when they can get them. Like this isn't some small like little side project where they're just going to inject like mRNA into you and it's going to mutate into like cancer in X amount of years, right? Like this is something that has been tested in that beyond anything. I mean, although it is a novel coronavirus, we know how coronaviruses work.
Right,
And
right.
we've been studying these for decades and decades and decades. So as complex as this might sound, it's not a novel virus in general. It's not like no aspect of this virus has ever been seen, and we have to create a completely new vaccine method of studying, like laboratory safety precautions, in order to just deal with this new virus, like completely new virus that came out. Like this is still a coronavirus. This is still something that we see in the flu, in the common cold. Like we're still somewhat familiar with how it functions and whatnot. Now its transmissibility and its death rate are higher, and that's essentially the new thing that we had to deal with, and we had to figure out how to get a vaccine for this specific coronavirus. And I feel like that's something that's always like overlooked. Like this isn't just like I've heard so many things about the mRNA. Like people are like, oh, it's going to change your DNA. Like you're gonna turn into a zombie in like 5 years. It's like no, like that's saying the flu shot's gonna do the same thing. Like why do you trust the flu shot?
Yeah,
A lot of people don't know that the flu shot is developed every single year.
yeah. What is it with people without scientific experience doubting the scientists
Yeah,
and the doctors? That's the issue. Without knowing what you're talking about, you can't really come up with these conspiracy theories, I would say,
because
about the vaccine
you're a
that we
goat,
have here.
brother. You're a sheep.
Yeah.
You're listening to the scientists, you sheep.
Yeah, I mean
There's
it's
such an American obsession with like being a sheep.
yeah.
I feel like it's only an American thing
Yeah.
now. Germany's having a big problem with it. Have you seen that?
Well, oh, the vaccines you mean?
With like QAnon. Like there's
Oh,
German
QAnon?
QAnon
Yeah,
now.
and there was even my dad was talking about how the U.S. is the only nation to have people who didn't want to get a vaccine, didn't want to wear a mask, and you see protests in like Quebec and then
In
like
Germany.
Britain and
Yeah,
Germany
Germany
as
had the same
well
thing.
about
Germany's
wearing
bad,
masks
bro.
and having a vaccine. There's
Yeah.
like literal like I'm not going to say the F word on the podcast. I apologize for that, guys. But there's freaking millions of and thousands of people on the streets in Quebec basically maskless saying, I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to
Yeah.
have these distancing regulations. And so these kinds of things happen worldwide. And the next debate that's happening right now is actually about COVID passports. Many countries like the European Union are now producing like green passports, I believe, like green passes to allow
Yeah.
people to go and travel to the European Union and back and within the European Union. And the US is now talking about developing these COVID-19 passports to allow you to go to, for example, university, an example like restaurants and bars and things like that. And Republicans are now saying that's restriction upon our liberties and our free speech and our free expression, that we have to carry around this passport to go any places. And so it's a big debate arising because, well, in my opinion, I think it's a common courtesy to get a vaccine, and I think if you
Yes.
have a
Yeah.
problem with the passports, get a vaccine. It's not that big of an ask to get a vaccine, and I think that I would not feel safe around people without a vaccine. I wouldn't want to affect them in any pervasive way, and so I would feel more safe about myself and other people's safeties with this kind of a vaccine passport and everywhere that I went to, and I would not have to wear a mask, not a distance. That's the benefit of it. And now
Yeah.
Brown University and like Cornell and I believe the Ivy Leagues have now said I'm going to require a vaccine passport to come back on campus this fall, which I
Yeah.
think it's a big thing because, for example, places like UGA, which may not require the vaccine passports, would not have as much freedom as these places with basically herd immunity within the colleges. Because now you're inside the college, you can't get the virus once you have this herd immunity, and I think it allows for a different degree of freedom than we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
Almost, I would compare it to the NBA bubble last year when every single person in there had gotten tested every single day. We knew they were safe, and they could like go around without masks on. They could have good conversations. They could go to bars, things like that. These things can continue if we all get the vaccine. So, what do you think about the whole discussion about vaccine passports and the merits of their argument about liberty versus order?
Yeah. So, I want to start just because you were kind of writing on the last point, just to bring it up.
Yeah,
Where
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
where I'm working right now, by May 15th, you have to have your first dose,
Right,
or like you have to have your first dose by May 15th. So, like the majority of people in where I'm working right now are already vaccinated. So we're already seeing like a return to normalcy. Like soon we're not going to have to, wear masks or whatnot. And like, that's the idea. It's going to be like a bubble that you're kind of talking about where it's like, hey, we all
right,
know that we're good. So that's like really cool. And I'm really excited to see, that normalcy again, where it's like, I know that I'm safe here. Like, this is cool. It's kind of like a ventilated, close off space from the rest of the world where it's, we're all vaccinated here. It's
right.
literally like, it's like reality. It's coming back to that normalcy. And then the other thing, I think that it's really, 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 really funny that Republicans are getting mad about not being able to enter a place because you don't have a piece of paper. Like they're the ones that are like, "Oh, immigrants! These damn
Yeah,
immigrants!" Like they're
yeah.
honestly, some of these Republicans are sounding a little bit communist. If you ask me, they're sounding
Right,
a little bit like
right.
no borders type Republicans here. Um, it's very interesting to see like the hypocrisies in the Republican Party.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
talk
very
about
in.
hypocrisies. Marco Rubio, have you seen him? His recent comments.
I did not.
He was talking about how corporations should be reprimanded for supporting woke culture,
Yeah, that's
basically.
that's the thing.
And
That's the funny thing
the
too. Yeah,
hypocrisy is that he's a pro corporationist person. And so
yeah.
it's like I'll read you a quote from him. I have it pulled up on my laptop. Give me a second. I'm
Go
gonna
for it.
find it.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
that's funny too. There's a lot of like
yeah.
free market capitalists that are like, Disney, stop it, Disney, stop being not racist.
Yeah.
Song of the South, play it, play the song of the. Have
Yeah.
you seen that? The Song of the
Yeah,
South.
the Song of the South.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
that
that was
was dude,
bad,
that's so
bro.
bad. Yeah,
That's
and I
so
think there was
bad.
one Disney ride that played the Song of the South, and it
Yeah,
was, like, disbanded after the whole, George Floyd incident. But I'm gonna read you the quote from Marco
go
Rubio
for it.
on I think it was Twitter or something. "Corporate America eagerly dumps woke, toxic nonsense into our culture, and it's only gotten more destructive with time. These campaigns will be met with the same strength that any other polluter should expect. The problem is, no polluters in America are given any kind of consequences by the Republicans. So what do you expect corporations to get? Like, it's the hypocrisy of like now I'm going to reprimand corporations, but for the past
Yeah,
century or so, I've been decreasing their taxes. I've been giving less regulations upon corporations. So why are you getting mad when now they're expressing their freedom of speech? Talk about 2010 or whatever that was, Citizens United versus FEC. That's talking about corporations and free speech. Conservatives love that, right? Now they have
yeah,
free speech when it comes to woke culture. Now they hate it. Just it kind of shows the hypocrisy of the party when it comes to things they like and don't like, and their bases, their fundamental base often shifts when it comes to these big discussions about like liberty versus order. And I think it's hypocrisy, like you said before, and it's funny to see what they're doing right now.
yeah. No, and that's the thing. That's like why I keep telling you, I'm like, man, bro, like, listen, be leftist before you're centrist. Like, don't say that you're centrist because right now we got to get rid of the like. okay, I was a big bipartisan guy. Big, huge bipartisan guy. I'm like, you know what? We have to compromise with the Republicans. But there is no compromise on that side of the aisle. And that's what I've realized. It's like, hey, if you do one thing, it's like it's bad. Like what's the thing? Like, okay, let's talk about background checks, right? Because we're having a huge conversation about guns right now in this country with shootings literally like every other goddamn day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Background checks. I think like 76% of Americans support background checks.
Uh-huh.
Why don't Republicans pass background checks? Because they don't want to.
Talk about the American Rescue Plan. Why did Republicans support that? Because Biden was the guy promoting it. Even though 90% or so of Americans supported the American Rescue Plan, Republicans didn't. It's stupid. Their own supporters supported the plan, but because of partisan interests and I would say Trumpism, they couldn't support it. And you know, for example, this Rubio guy I was talking about is going to run for president in 2024. De facto, it's Marco Rubio. And you have him, you have DeSantis, and now you have Liz Cheney in the running. And I think she might run for president. Chris Christie might run for president. And Liz Cheney's the outlier there because he's a whole different story. But there was some kind of a leak announcing that he might run for president. But Liz Cheney's a whole different story because Liz Cheney is that centrist person. She was the only one to vote for impeachment.
They're not centrist, though. They're American centrists. They're American centrists, but I think on the political spectrum of Trumpism versus centrism, she's pretty center anti-Trump. Because she's the only Republican in the House to vote against. The thing is, that's not, like, I wouldn't compromise with Liz Cheney. I wouldn't be like, oh, you're anti-Trump. Like, that's the normal human reaction. Like, the normal human reaction should be like, hey, let's not listen to the big orange guy talking about LeBron James being racist.
But let's contextualize it here. The situation we're in right now is Trumpism versus this kind of moderate democratic liberalism that Biden supports. And then you have Bernie and AOC. She's more of like, I think, a mix between Biden centrism and left-leaning democracy and then like this Trumpism. I think, you know, in policy, she's conservative. But in ideology, she's like anti-Trump and anti... In morals, she's fully conservative. The problem is she voted against or for the impeachment of Trump. And that might cost her election in her home state in 2022, I believe. And if she wins the election, I think they're saying she might run for president because she has that support. The problem is, Damien, the Trumpism is so big in Republican culture even now.
Because we let it get there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. The Democratic Party let it get there. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the Democratic Party has always just been afraid to be like, no. And listen, I completely disagree with what's his face fundamentally. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Completely disagree with him, like, politically, like, on most issues, right? Don't like the guy. He is, like, again, he's liberal, right? Like, I'm not liberal. Like, I don't like his neoliberal policies. I think that he's a weak Democrat. One thing that I was very happy to see him say is that they're not going to negotiate with Susan Collins. Right. They did it in 2010. Right. They need to stop because it's not a negotiation. It's not a negotiation. It's literally just giving up policies that the American people want in order to seem somewhat bipartisan. And the problem is, I understand that you need that to get the legislation passed. Okay, you need something better than nothing. But the problem is in Democratic campaigning. I feel like Democratic candidates need to stop coming off as centrist. They need to stand up for transgender issues. You can't have 80-year-old Nancy Pelosi saying that George Floyd sacrificed his life for the movement. It doesn't work anymore.
The problem there is these people are like 100 years old.
That's what I'm saying. There should be a cap on it.
Dude, there has to be a cap on it. Nancy Pelosi,
an age limit.
Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, they're the definition of what an age limit and term limit would help with. Because, for example, you wouldn't have people running for like what? How many years has Dianne Feinstein been in office?
65 above, you're done. If you're older than 65, you're done. Because listen, and someone said that I was ageist for saying that on one of my streams.
No,
do you realize you have to be 35 to be president? Is that not ageist? Like that in every sense is. So why isn't it 65?
The past generation is making our policies for the new generation. That past generation is anti-transgender for the most part, anti-social rights. It's a whole different political climate. And the reason why they win, once again, is this name brand culture of Congress and politics. Because if we think about it, the way in which Ted Cruz, for example, the way in which freaking Ted Cruz
Bro,
wins
just say
the
it.
elections.
Listen, we're so weird with provocatives on this podcast. Like
No, we
every
should
other
be-
episode, we're
yeah.
like, we just throw in provocatives, and
Yeah.
then we just don't. We're like, no provocatives. We're child friendly. Go for
But
it.
the way in which lying Ted wins his elections every single year is number one, eccentricism, and number two, him being lying Ted, him having like the brand name image. And so I think the only way that these people get out of office is term limits. And it's a huge debate, but I think it's needed. I mean, is there even I don't know what the debate is right now. You know, is it ageism versus like, keeping up with the new generation of politics? I don't know what the debate is, but
I don't know. No, I agree with you. I think that it needs to be like term limits or age limits. I don't know necessarily term limits, right? Because I feel like term limits is a little bit different where it's like, hey, if this guy is doing good and he's young and he's able and we're liking his policies, then he should keep running. But age limit is just a different. I don't know, because
I mean, like
it seems like a
big term
hypocritical
limits. Yeah, I mean, like big term limits, like 6 or 7 term limits, because the problem is the majority of these Dianne Feinsteins and Nancy Pelosi, not to pick on those two people, but the reason why they're in office is because they've had like what 10, 12 terms. In the Senate, House of Representatives, and that's why they're still in office. With the term limits, it would decrease the amount of elections they win, because the reason why they win the elections, once again, is through name brand politics.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Yeah, no, it definitely does need to be more competitive, and that's the thing. Like what I'm saying in the Democratic Party, right? And this is why I'm definitely like starting to go towards the DSA. Like,
okay, yeah.
But the thing is, the DSA will never win. But the DSA did do really good in this election cycle. With policies that they supported. Yes, the DSA did extremely well. They won, like, I wouldn't even be able to give you a number, but like the problem is, like, I don't want the DSA. I want the Democratic Party to be the Democratic Party and to actually function as such and to actually promote policies that are American. The thing is that the Democratic Party has just shied away from being extremists. And the thing is that they get called. I was watching Fox News the other day, Fox Sunday. What's his face? The little guy, really old guy, the one that looks like he sells the cookies. You know what I'm talking about?
Is it Hugh Hewitt? No.
No. He does Fox Sundays.
I forget. I know who you're talking about though. I'll search it up.
He was the moderator for one of the debates.
Fox
Sundays. No, just do Fox Sunday. Just do Fox Sunday.
Is it? I don't even know. I'm seeing multiple people. Is it Fox and Friends or the regular Fox show?
Fox Sunday.
Oh, is it? No. It's that moderate guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the moderate guy. What's his face?
Chris Wallace.
Chris Wallace.
Yeah, he looks like the little guy that sells the cookies. You know what cookies I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He's like a little elf. Wait, where was I going with Chris Wallace?
I don't know, man.
I lost it on the elf.
Tell me.
Oh, I was watching Fox Sunday. That's what it was. I was watching Fox Sunday, and who's what's his face? The guy that's the biggest Republican in the House of Representatives.
Is it Kevin McCarthy?
Yeah, McCarthy was on, and McCarthy was saying, and I laughed so hard. I was sitting on my couch, and I died laughing. It was like Joe Biden and his socialist policies. And like that's offensive,
dude.
Like, that's offensive because
dude, they called Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff big socialists when they were centrists as well.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, if literally everything you're gonna do is gonna be seen as socialist, send it. Go for it. Like, because the thing is, Americans end up wanting these policies a lot more. And I know that you fundamentally agree with a lot of aspects of socialism, but like. On the spectrum, let's talk about democratic socialism. A lot of Americans want a lot of these democratic socialist policies, at least from a societal perspective. Let's not talk about the economy. Let's not talk about from an economic perspective. From a societal perspective, right? Talking about Black Lives Matter, talking about pro-LGBTQ rights. I don't get why the Democratic Party doesn't just run with these issues. You know, I think ironically, Joe Biden had like the strongest take on it. Where it was like, it was a bad take, but he got the point. The old man got the point. Where it was, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, instead of saying that, advocate for policies that kind of make people feel that way. And that's the problem. Democratic Party, The Democratic Party doesn't get black votes and minority votes because they're advocates for minorities. They get the minority votes because the Republicans are like literally Satan when it comes to minorities.
They don't fight for the minority votes.
That's what I'm saying.
Imagine if they fought for the votes. Imagine if they fought. Because, for example, if you have like a Liz Cheney in 2024, she'll fight for those minority votes and probably win them.
Doubt.
Really?
That's a problem. That's a problem.
She's the anti-Trump person. And they like Republican policies in some circumstances.
No, a lot of minorities like Republican policies.
Right.
A
exactly.
lot of minorities like Republican.
And I think it's more about, we talk about political like voting and things like that. The biggest influence is family. And the majority of minority families, they predominantly vote Democratic.
Yeah, but they're conservative in ideals. Like a lot of Hispanics are Catholic.
The thing is, some people even like have these ideals and still vote Democratic, even though they have like conservative ideas and conservative wants.
Exactly. But the problem is because one party is literally like, "Hey, we don't hate black people," and then the other party is like, "Hey, we hate black people." So it's not like you're voting between, "Hey, we support black people," and "Hey, we don't support black people." You're literally voting between not racism and racism. Right. And not racism isn't enough anymore. And that's what I'm complaining about with the Democratic Party. It needs to stop being just not like non-racist. And that's why I don't like, listen, love podcast support, big podcast guy here. I don't know if you know this, but we got our own podcast. What's it called? The freaking neoliberals that do this stupid podcast.
Is it the Breakfast Club?
No. Pod Save America.
Oh, that one.
Pod Save America.
No,
yes.
They're more than neoliberals.
No, they're neoliberals.
They're
big
all
Obama.
Neoliberals. I mean,
exactly. They're all neoliberals.
Yeah,
they're all neoliberals, and that's the problem. Like a lot of people listen to their takes and they're like, they're smart. It's like we can do better than that. We can do better than them. Right. Like we have to stop just settling as a party, I feel like. And we have to start advocating and being aggressive and not just being passive, because ironically, we're conservative when it comes to what we advocate for. We're like, yeah, we like that. And the thing is, in this country and in politics, hate is stronger than love. And hate is stronger than love because Republicans are more passionate about things they hate than Democrats are passionate about things they love.
Right.
And that needs to change. The Democratic, because I mean, listen, the Conservative Party is just built on hate and it's built on saying no to change. And, you know, it's what? Okay, you want environmental change? No. You want gun reform? No. You want pro-LGBTQ rights? No. You want black rights? No. You want more voting? No. It's everything is just no. That's like that's literally what the word conservative means. I don't know why people get like mad at this take.
Right.
Like conservative means not to change, remain in the status quo.
Right.
And it should be difficult to remain in the status quo when so many people don't want to. When the status quo is hurting so many people. When you have mothers working again 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet, not receiving health care, not seeing their kids. And how are the Democrats not winning every election? It's crazy.
I think it's a change of messaging needed in the next cycle for elections because Democrats have not been promoting their policies enough. We haven't been going out to low-income minority places and saying we can help you with the American Rescue Plan. People don't get enough information about resources available to them as with welfare programs. And I think these things are needed for messaging's sake. I think it's a great discussion to be talked about. But then again, like the media sources, I mean, talking about Fox News, going back to your previous point, on that network, I was watching it earlier today, and Tucker was talking about basically his big take today was the fact that Doug Emhoff, the first husband, I believe, of the United States, Kamala Harris's husband, he wants to be called second husband. He wants to be called, I believe, Douglas, as opposed to Doug. And he was calling that a bombshell because he wanted to be called Douglas. And I'm like, bro, you can talk about so many things right now, the border crisis, things like that. And you choose to talk about Doug Emhoff, the second husband or whatever of the United States.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And so, but the problem is that kind of media coverage attracts viewers so much
Yeah,
because they're so
bro.
eccentric about it. Trump
Yes.
was like that too. He brought up stupid points that people liked and
Yeah.
they kind of like related to. I think the problem we're having right now is people aren't relating to democratic ideas. And I think in some circumstances, sure, you have shootings going on, you have mass economic problems going on, you relate to that. The problem is
Uh-huh.
you're not making it appealing, I think, to many people.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time explaining what appealing
No.
means
Yeah,
and
no,
missing the
I get what you're
context.
talking about.
Yeah.
What's it called? The type of politics it's called. It's called I can't remember. It's like social when you like get society to go against each other. Um oh man, I can't remember the term for it. It's funny because I use the term all the time, but essentially identity politics is kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what Fox and the right is really good at doing is going again. It's built. The Republican Party is built off of fear and hate, and it's a lot easier to spread fear and hate than it is to spread love and hope in our political system. And what I mean by that is a lot easier to say, "Hey, they're gonna take your guns. They're coming
Right.
for your
Right.
guns," than to say, technically, yes, we're coming for your guns, but we're coming for your guns only in this manner, and we're only going to come for these types of guns because of this reason. And we've seen that it's so much more that you have to explain. And that's what I've always said. Being a Republican is really bomb on face value. If you don't look at any issue beyond the surface, then being conservative makes sense 1,000%.
Right. And
But
it's fear mongering. Think about
that's
it.
what I'm saying. It's called, oh my God, I can't remember what
It's
it's
the same
called.
propaganda campaigns that Hitler used in Nazi Germany, fear mongering. Because he made up these conspiracies, these unrelated things about Jews and about the backstabbing myth about, like I told you last time about Jews basically coming into the World War II or World War One and making the Germans lose. He made up these myths and talked about them so much they became reality.
Yeah.
These things continue to happen. I think that these parties have become populist parties partly because they have these fabricated stories, these stories that gain attention but aren't related to the actual discussion about economic policy, social policy in America. We come here with some broad takes, but we still stay true to the facts, to perspectives. And I think what I'm seeing with Fox News, and it's unprecedented, the amount of falsified information that I see. I mean, back on our podcast when, for example, Joe Biden was inaugurated president, there was a person on our Instagram who was saying that PolitiFact was a left-leaning organization. And I go, wait a second. PolitiFact is a fact-checking website. So
Yeah.
how can you say it's a left-leaning news media? But for them, everything is left-leaning news media. Everything is fake news. And there's no semblance of being accurate. Everything is partisan. And so I think we have to return to this skepticism of all news to make sure we get the best information from multiple sources. But it's hard because nobody wants to look past their source. Go ahead.
The problem is that the left is right. Like, that's the problem. PolitiFact is left leaning because it's looking for facts, and I'm trying to say this. The facts are left leaning. The facts are always left leaning. Is gun reform good? Is the gun reform that's being advocated for good? Yes. The facts are always left leaning, right? Is raising the minimum wage bad? No. The facts are always left leaning. They're always left leaning in perspective, in long term, and everything. So it's when you look at it from that perspective and you're like, oh, that's just leftist. It's like, yes, the dictionary is also leftist. From that idea, the dictionary is left leaning. And you can say the dictionary is left leaning because it has words like woke in it or words like twerk in it. Oh, those are left words. Those are words that the left uses, or it has non-conservative words. Okay, so is that dictionary, by then including terms that you disagree with, left-leaning, or is it just a factually accurate piece of paper? Is it just a factually accurate book? Right? It's like saying that the Bible is conservative, which ironically the Bible is left-leaning, but if you actually listen to what the Bible says, the Bible is most definitely socialist. But beyond that, it would be exactly like that. It would just be like saying, I don't know, what's something that's guns are right leaning. From that perspective, no, dude. Research papers are not left-leaning. Like Stanford University isn't left-leaning. Academia isn't left-leaning. Academia is left-leaning because all of this stuff is what the Democratic Party talks about. It's what the left talks about. Like, you can't go to Stanford and be like, climate change isn't real. Like, no professor at Stanford is going to tell you. So by a professor at Stanford acknowledging that climate change exists, the whole university is now left leaning. No, it's just facts. Like, it's just like, I can't, man. This is America.
Yeah, and this is the place where we don't look at the facts. We look at what our news channel tells us. We look at what Tucker tells us and what these political figureheads tell us. We have to come back to independent reviewing of sources. We can't be guided by these things that are so partisan in their nature that they basically feed us falsified information. And they make our takes on certain issues just completely, I don't know how to say it, like just it's misguided, ill-guided.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about the same discussion, talking about fact-checking and looking at the sources with the Makia Bryant shooting that happened last week, I believe, of a black 16-year-old girl who, by many Democrats, said she was basically innocently murdered and was killed based upon a police brutality incident. I was about to tweet on that and say, my condolences, police brutality should not exist in this nation. And I went ahead and watched the video on YouTube. And I had some very different takes than I would usually have on a case like this. I know you watched the video too, Damien. So I'll let you go ahead and talk about that, and I'll come back and chime in on my takes.
Yeah, we talked about it. I remember that we talked about it a little bit in class where we were like, oh, like, hey, we should talk about this on the podcast. It was a justified shooting. There's very few circumstances where you go, hey, that police officer unloaded his clip, discharged his weapon justifiably. That's a circumstance where I think that the police officer justifiably unloaded and discharged his weapon. I don't think that it was either the other girl's life or the girl. I mean, it's these face value things. It's like just the way that I go, how can you look at George Floyd's murder and go, that's not a murder? How can you look at this other situation and be like, that's not a justified police shooting?
Right.
Like it's just a justified police killing. And if you say otherwise, you're an idiot. And that's the thing that I've been seeing a lot of the right be like, oh, the left wants to close their eyes to this one. No, dude, cool. You got one damn shooting. You got one shooting that is actually valid. What about Breonna Taylor? What about Eric Garner? What about George Floyd? What about Rodney King?
What about the hundreds of people in the past month?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So what? You got one. Why don't you talk about Dante Wright? Yeah. Why are you only why is Fox News only talking about this one?
Is because Democrats are making a big deal out of it themselves. Yeah. They're now saying that her life was killed or taken away for no reason of her own, no fault of her own. That's the problem. Democrats are phrasing it as a situation in which police brutality was used. Where in my case, I would say not, because I would encourage y'all to watch the video. It's very, it's not the best one to watch in terms of like, what you see is very, very distraughful. But watch the video and let us know what you think. Because what I saw from the video...
Tweet at us. At Polititeen Show.
Yeah, and message us on the website, whatever. But basically, I saw the video. And what I saw was, I saw a 16-year-old girl. Obviously, I couldn't tell her age in the video. But she was trying to stab somebody at her house. And she was in the act of stabbing the person when the police officer, I don't know, he shot her, emptied the full round. And that's what I saw. I saw a girl's life threatened. I didn't know about the 16-year-old girl's background. If she was 16, I didn't know about her situation. All I saw was a woman's life being threatened. And as a police officer, I would have acted on that. They're trained to act on situations in which a person's life is endangered.
They did it right. For one time, they did it right.
Here's the thing. What if that woman was not 16? What if she was like 21 years old, a serial murderer, and he killed the woman? He can't tell that at the exact circumstance. He can't tell what she was thinking at the exact circumstance. So he can't read her mind. And the problem is Democrats are complaining that she was a 16-year-old. She had mental health, whatever issues. He couldn't tell any of these things. Yeah. And so I think it's a high standard to hold our police to. I think to protect the civilians in our county and in our vicinity, we have to let them act in these certain ways because a person's life was in danger and this was appropriate. I think in the George Floyd circumstance, there was a whole different scenario. Nobody's life was in danger. In the Dante Wright circumstance, nobody's life was in danger. He was running away from the person, the police officer. This circumstance, one person's life was imminently in danger. That was an act that saved somebody's life.
Yes.
It killed somebody. That is a unfortunate repercussion, but it also saved somebody's life, and that's what I think the police have to highlight in this situation.
And it objectively saved someone's life.
Right.
It
seems terrible for us saying this, but objectively it saved somebody's life.
Yes, there was literally in the act of literally had her arm cocked back.
Right.
And was going to stab. This objective, there was no like, oh, in 5 years, George Floyd would have done this because he used fentanyl, so he would have walked into a gas station and shot everyone. Like, that's not objective. That's by no means objective. And you know what's funny? Me and you, this is what I could say right now. And this is what the right would be saying had it been the other way around. Had this been in, because they literally do it all the time. They literally did it with Adam Toledo, which is absolutely disgusting, a 13-year-old boy. Let's say this 16-year-old girl, straight A student, straight A student, accepted into Harvard, graduating with a 4.6 GPA, valedictorian, and she got shot by the police, even though she was about to murder someone. Does that police officer know that she's a valedictorian? Does that police officer know that she's accepted into Harvard? So then how did the damn police officers know anything about what was in George Floyd's system? How did the damn police officers know anything about his criminal past? So is that the standard that we're going to be held to? How did the police officers know that Adam Toledo had a gang-initiated tattoo on his ribcage or wherever it was? They didn't, because they couldn't see it. So it's absolutely asinine to the conversation at hand.
Exactly. It's irrelevant.
It's completely irrelevant. What we know is that Adam Toledo was instructed to put his hands up. He was armed. He put the arm down. He put his hands up. He was shot. What we do know is that Dante Wright was driving away and was not an imminent threat to anybody. Anybody. And he was shot. What we do know is that George Floyd was on the ground for 9 minutes and 26 seconds and was murdered. That's what we do know. They were in handcuffs. And yes, we can get stuck up on this one shooting, which, listen, the Democrats are saying, oh, she had mental health issues. Cool. Now pass reform. Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Because to an extent, it still is police brutality. And it still is racism. And I'll tell you why. Because she grew up in a household, in a system where she was not able to accommodate her mental health needs, because African Americans are disproportionately not able to accommodate their mental health needs, their physical health needs, their education. They're shown because of they're a product of their environment. So while, yes, this is not racism because a white police officer shot a black girl, it is racism because the system put this girl in a position to where she was going to stab someone else.
Right. And she apparently had needed to because the woman had threatened her life beforehand. And I think the situation she was in was obviously a terrible one, but she was put in that situation by her socioeconomic, scenario.
Exactly.
And so it's all about looking deeper and more than what the media tells you, and encouraging people to find a solution on an institutional level.
There was another shooting today, too, wasn't there? A guy was shot driving away from a dealership.
Yeah,
shot in the back by the SWAT team. It was a narcotics raid, something like that. I don't know the individual's name.
And then Isaiah Brown was shot 6 times, I believe, a couple of weeks or last week, and he was shot because
Isaiah Brown?
Isaiah Brown, I believe. No, not the one you're talking about.
Okay, we're not talking
about Isaiah
that.
Brown was the one who was shot for following the words of the police officer. Black man, the Virginia deputy that he was shot by told him to raise his hands and hold them up, and he held them up, and he thought there was a gun in his arms, I believe, and he shot him with 6 rounds. Oh no, he thought a cordless house phone was a gun when he raised his arms. And the thing was, as he was being ordered to raise his arms, he was on the phone with 911 about a whole different scenario. And so this man was literally calling 911 and was shot 6 times for holding up the cordless phone and communicating with them.
Yeah.
And the
But
thing
what
is, he's
was his
following
GPA?
protocol. I don't know what.
What
It's
college did he
irrelevant.
go to? Did he have any arrest warrants?
That's the question. Yeah,
Who was he on the phone with?
yeah. It's an issue. This one is terrible because there was no fault of his own, zero fault of the person, and he was shot 6 times. And I can't even fathom how his family's feeling. Condolences to both his family and the family of Makia Bryant, we talked about earlier. But that was gut wrenching. One more thing I wanted to talk about. I forget what the person's name was. I'm going to pull it up really quickly. But it was Mrs. One second. It was Miss Nafia Ikram. I don't know if you heard about her, but she was an Asian American, I believe, person who was doused with acid outside of her house.
Yeah, I did. It was the college student, was it not?
A college student at some kind of university, and she was doused with acid all across her face. And her mom was a pharmacist or some kind of a nurse, and she was able to put water on her face and save her life. But now that woman, who is a product of a hate crime, I would say, is basically sidelined. Her career is sidelined. Her college is sidelined. She has a life-threatening facial, effects from the situation, injuries, and now she has. I think she's going to have permanent eye damage, is what they're saying, the doctors.
Yeah,
and
she
so
might
I was
never
really
be able to see again.
Yeah, and I was really, just surprised. Not surprised, more like just scared about the future of the Asian American race in the U.S. after the situation, because now you have people in my family, people in my my distant cousins who were like, "Can I go outside?" Because now there's the threat of like being doused with acid. And I think there could have been a different factor associated with why she was doused with acid, but still, the point stands. It could have been a hate crime, a racially motivated crime, and just because of that, there's a certain fear associated with going outside now. And that was it was gut wrenching seeing her face after the incident. And I think it's something that I want to bring up. Prayers out to her and her family as they're dealing with this situation.
Yeah, and it's a lot of. We're gonna actually have a conversation with an individual who it's called what is it? It's APIA vote. If I'm not mistaken, let me just double check it.
Asian American AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander. Yeah.
Asian AAPI vote. Yeah, that's what it is. We're actually gonna have a conversation with the national coordinator for AAP or API. Sorry, APIA vote. That's what it is. APIA vote. Look into it. He actually just reached back out to me. Kind of podcast related, more casual than me and you were talking about. It's like, hey, behind the scenes stuff on the podcast. Look at this live look for you guys. But did reach back out to me. We'll coordinate that behind the scenes and get you guys a conversation with him. Amazing individual. I know him semi personally on that note, but that's what I keep, and that's what I told you when the George Floyd situation was happening, and you were like, I'm still gonna do the Pledge of Allegiance and whatnot. And if Boys State is listening to this, you're not. But
no, they're not.
But I was like, it's not about whether you're a model minority. It's just about when it's your turn. It's just about when it's your turn.
Right.
And when it's your turn, it's your turn. Because think about this, and I was going to mention this earlier when we were talking about India, right? Right now, and this time it was the Kung flu. These racial remarks, the Kung flu, the Wuhan virus, the China virus, these disgusting racially charged remarks. What's it going to be next time? What if the virus comes from India next time, Varun? Like, what if it comes from brown people next? Like, what's it going to be then?
Look, hate transcends racial things between like being black or being Indian or being Asian. It's all about, if you're not a white male, you have a chance of being discriminated against. And that's the reality, because I think there's just some sort of a God complex that many people have about them being white males, and how, discrimination is okay against minorities. And I think, like you said before, hate is more attractive than showing love is.
Yeah.
And it's easier to hate than it is to love. And I think many people take the easy route and really don't focus upon accepting people regardless of their race and their heritage and their sexuality now. Yeah. And it's a big issue we can continue talking about on the next couple of episodes. But I think it's becoming late. It's like what 11:30 here
Yeah,
on a
11:30
Monday
p.m. East
night.
Coast.
But yeah, we'll be back on it this Friday, guys. Come tune in. We'll be back. We'll have a little bit of a break after this one, though. We're going to have AP exams for me and Damien coming up, advanced placement exams for college credit. And so we'll be off for a couple of weeks, just having 1 or 2 episodes those weeks.
Yeah, well,
I
whenever
think,
we
yeah,
can, whenever we got some free time, we'll hop out
yeah.
some episodes. Really enjoying these conversations a little bit more.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
a lot more casual. I think that we matured a lot more from like last year, where we were kind of just talking to like nobody, but like now we're actually talking to each other.
Yeah,
Like we were just talking to like who we presume to be our audience, but now we're talking to each other, and it's a lot.
right.
It's a lot of fun, and I can't wait to we can find a setting where both of us can film together. That's going to be really
And
awesome. Probably,
summer's going to be a movie, man. We're going to have a
yeah.
lot of guests on the podcast, have, maybe some marathons of just talking
Yes.
about social issues. We'll have like a lot of time
Some
on our
live
hands.
streams, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do. But no, beyond that. Oh, another thing, just a really quick. Did you see the letter from Donald Trump to like LeBron James?
To LeBron James? No.
Yeah, that was so funny, man. It was like a tweet in the form of a letter because he can't tweet anymore. He was
Yeah.
like calling LeBron James a racist.
He called him a racist.
Yeah,
Was
it
that
had to
today?
do. No, it was like
Oh my.
2 days ago, maybe.
Oh yeah,
Yesterday,
3 days ago. I
three
didn't
days
see it.
ago. Yeah, yeah, it was funny. Look at to any of the listeners that have made it to this point. Look at that letter. It's really, really, really funny. Like the way that he literally wrote the letter as if it's a tweet. Like he capitalized things like he would on Twitter.
Yeah,
But
and he
the
always does. His
yeah,
press releases are all like tweets, pretty much,
yeah,
because he's feeling
exactly.
bad in the Mar-a-Lago without a platform to talk to people.
He's
I
gonna
feel
hop
bad
on
for him,
Parlor.
man. I mean, he has like no platform. He's a Telegram now. I heard about
Yes.
that, but that's about
Yeah.
it.
But speaking of having a platform, we thank you guys for tuning into our platform for another episode of the Polititeen podcast. I thank my wonderful co-host Varun for having an amazing conversation, adding as you always do to it, driving it, bringing in some statistics and some new points that drove the conversation that we really had today, as you always do. And if you guys want to see what we're doing beyond the scenes, you guys are behind the scenes and beyond what we do here on the podcast, go ahead and check out our social medias. That's at Polititeen Show, both on Instagram and Twitter. I will be live streaming whenever I kind of like get back in the habit of it. Kind of slacking off there, so I won't even plug the live stream. But be sure to check that out whenever it does come back. Be sure to tune into all the ends of the episode so you guys can catch that. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, another episode done. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in. Tune in next time. And that'll be it. Thank you guys so much. Goodbye.